It's been 50 years since the first mobile phone call, and now the digital landscape has changed beyond recognition. Smartphones have become an essential in everyday life, and many would say they can't live without them. But what if we took a step away from our screens? Perhaps it's finally time to. And what exactly are smartphones doing to our brains? I'm Lucrezia Millarini, and this is What You Need to Know. Hello and welcome to today's episode of What You Need to Know, and I'm joined by ITV News reporter Fay Barker, who's been looking into the impact of smartphones for an ITV Tonight programme. Welcome to the podcast, Faye.
Hello.
Listen, so much to talk about. We all rely on our smartphones for pretty much everything. We've got ours here. We can't stop looking at them. Just tell us about what you were looking into.
Well, this is a topic I'm coming to as both a journalist and also as a mum of three kids. I've got a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old girls, and then an 8-year-old son. And I suppose as a parent in the last couple of years, I've increasingly seen the impact, especially on my older child, of what's happened as she's had social media. I let her have it, rightly or wrongly, and it's been firefighting with her. So that's been an issue. So I think as a result of that, I will treat my younger children differently with this issue. And generally, as a parent, you want to treat all your kids the same if you have more than one child. So I've definitely come from that camp, but now I've had to go, I've got to do this differently, because I think we're learning on the hoof the impact that too much screen time, too much social media, I think in particular, is having on children. And so I think the people I've talked to, whether it's teachers, whether it's health professionals, other parents, and even the kids themselves, you can see this is actually becoming a really big problem. And so we investigated this for the Tonight programme. An episode of Tonight called Smartphones, Time to Live Without Them is the question. And of course, all of us are very reliant on them. As we're sat here with our phones now, and as part of the programme, I did look at my own social media use. Over 2 weeks, I monitored my smartphone use, including my social media use. And my screen time was averaging 5 hours a day.
Goodness.
I know.
It doesn't seem like that, does it? But,
No.
I reckon I'd be the same.
Yeah. So I had you can kind of check it as well in your settings if you want to. In your screen time, if someone has an iPhone, that's what you do. 5 hours a day, and that would equate to almost 7 years of the rest of my life.
Oh, goodness.
Screen time. So that's just, I've got two phones. That's a combined devices, one for work, one for everything else. And so that was a bit of a wake-up call for myself. But that is actually quite average, And yes, we use our phones for work as well as maybe scrolling. I get a lot of WhatsApp messages. I might be selling stuff on second-hand sites, that kind of thing. That's where the investigation came out of, and we've spoken to quite a lot of different people throughout it.
It is really interesting, and it's interesting you point out that the concern that we've heard from so many parents who are concerned about what their kids are accessing while they're on their phones, but that level of time, what it's doing to their, I guess, concentration and things like that. But also, they're spending, you found that 9 hours a day some teens are spending on their mobile devices. And it's about, it's the algorithms as well. Tell me about the algorithms and social media and how they kind of get people coming back, don't they?
Yeah, so a lot of the concern is about behavioural addiction that we're seeing in around a quarter of teens and young people, children basically. The way that they use smartphones, there are these signs of basically it's addiction. There's addiction is linked to a lot of things, but you can perhaps, a neuroscientist I spoke to said it's a bit, the closest it is to maybe like gambling. It's that sort of reward and pleasure of
it's that hit of seeing someone's responded to something you may have put up on Instagram. They've liked a photo, and it's that little rush like doing exercise. Endorphin, I suppose.
The dopamine is the sort of hormone, if you like, the feel-good hormone that gets fired up in your brain when you're kind of expecting exciting things. You think, oh, what's next? And anyone who has scrolled through the likes of TikTok and stuff, yes, things are very quick, and you can just keep going and keep going. Now, this week we did have the Safer Phones Bill launched, and it isn't law yet, but it's ideas from a Labour MP about changes to look at this. And one of the things in this, and it's a little bit complicated to explain, but I'll try and make it simple, is they talk a bit about the internet age. Currently that's 13, so this is an age when companies are able to get children's data, if you like, without parental consent. So when you see a lot of these social media apps, their age is 13 as a recommended age, there's a lot of concern that that's actually to do with data laws, not to do with whether that is actually being considered a safe age for children to have these apps. So part of the Safer Phones Bill is moving that age from 13 to 16. And that also then fields into the algorithms, because if a company can know, say, a child likes looking at cute cat videos, for example, they can gather that data and then they'll just keep showing them cat videos. And therefore, that's where you maybe get the addiction, because they keep seeing, oh, this is another cute animal, that's another cute animal. Now, cute animals aren't going to cause too many problems, I think, apart from maybe the amount of time a kid might be looking at funny videos. Yeah. But obviously, you know, an algorithm can throw all sorts of things in there. You know, I said to my 14-year-old, is there anything you've seen that you've not wanted to see? And she just said, oh, yeah, there was this picture of someone being hit by a car. That just randomly comes out of nowhere. And you can't unsee that.
Yeah, no trigger warning, anything like that.
No.
It'll just pop up.
And so why that popped up on her feed, I've no idea. But these things happen, and there's growing evidence where you see this happening.
Faye, you spoke to your teenager, you've spoken to quite a few teenagers as part of your investigation, and you spoke to 17-year-old Libby. Let's hear what they had to say.
I use my mobile phone all day, every day. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is check my social medias, go through my phone. When I'm getting ready, I always have something playing. And then on my way to college, I'll be on my phone. When I'm at college, all my work is on my phone. I take notes on my phone. All my work gets handed in on my phone, like online. And then before bed, I'll go through all my social medias, and I'll usually fall asleep while doing that.
Dad doesn't look too impressed, does he?
Well, that's Libby's granddad.
Oh, sorry, granddad.
Yeah, that's Libby's granddad. He's 76-year-old Alan. He's looking good for 76.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll be pleased to know he looks like her dad. But we did an interesting experiment with Alan and Libby. Libby's 17, Alan's 76. And they swapped phones effectively for 4 days. So Alan had Libby's smartphone for 4 days. Now, she uses her smartphone a lot. She's quite typical of that age, 9 hours a day. And that would actually equate to, I think it was 24 years of her life. Oh. Because she's still so young.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see the effect. Now, to sort of sum it up, really, as you might expect, Alan was just kind of, what is this device? It's pinging constantly, and he found it very, very irritating having a gadget, a smartphone that was going off a lot. He does have his own phone, and I think it is actually a smartphone that he has, but he doesn't know how to use it. So for this experiment, we actually gave Libby a so-called dumb phone. So she had a phone that would just do texts and calls. So she had to live without her normal kind of online life for that 4 days. And she found it quite hard at times. But then she did also find by the end of the experiment that when we had a psychologist who spoke to them about it, and when she sort of spoke to her and looked at how it had affected her over those 4 days, actually she had better sleep. She felt she'd had a bit more sort of quality time with people in real life.
Yes, IRL.
Yeah, and she did a bit of FOMO, another one there, fear of missing out. She had a bit of that.
Yeah.
But actually, and it made her think about, my granddad must feel a bit left out sometimes when they've got a really good relationship. He would come to their house most evenings, and sometimes she was thinking he'll come in and he'll see the rest of us on our phones, and she said that's rubbish. So I think it was good for her to just to step away from that digital world for a bit, look at her own use of social media and of smartphones. And for Alan, I mean, he was brilliant. He was great fun, and he just said, I don't know what they're doing on these phones. Why, of course, people do get out and see your friends.
It's a really interesting point that you mentioned, that you make there about, the fact that Grandad Alan would be sitting there thinking, why is she always on her phone? I get that from my parents, my in-laws as well. Why are you on your phones all the time? And do you know what? It is a little bit rude sometimes. It does come across like that. So I can totally appreciate that. But also there is something, isn't there? And you spoke to the experts on this, about exactly what it does
Yeah.
to our brains when we're doing that all the time.
Yeah, so we went to Reading University and spoke to a brilliant neuroscientist called Professor McCabe. She's been looking at the brain's reward system, and she's done some really interesting studies about chocolate, actually, and how that's a different story, really. But when we want to see what's going on in our brains, when we look at things like social media, I got put into an MRI scanner so we could look at my brain while I was rigged up looking at a typical kind of scrolling feed.
Yeah.
To get an idea of what happens. And actually, it's the sort of front of the brain, the area which deals with reward. And you can see when this sort of data is analysed, how that is sort of fired up. And that's the sort of reward system, the dopamines. And it's a kind of feel-good hormone. And in some ways, that works in the same way in adults as it does in children. But where it's different is to do with the control centre part of the brain. I'll try not to get too sciencey. I'll let Kira explain that. But when it comes to the bit where we control our use of things like social media or anything that we might maybe show addiction signs to, adults have better control over that, whereas younger people and adolescents don't, because it's not fully developed. Let's just have a listen to Kira explaining this.
The reward system is a set of structures in the brain that respond to pleasurable, enjoyable information or experiences. And therefore, you can see when you use something like a smartphone, if you're on apps that are enjoyable or rewarding, then it's going to activate parts of the brain that are involved in reward.
So there we're getting an idea of what is going on in our brains and how it differs really in adults and children.
I suppose this is why Safer Phones Bill, which is being proposed by MPs, they want to launch it, don't they? This is what they're aiming to tackle.
It is, yeah. There's a lot of concerns, and I think a lot of the focus has been talking about phones in schools, and so the Safer Phones Bill would have a ban on phones in school. At the moment, there's just guidance from the government on this. And head teachers deal with this in very different ways. And I think mostly you could probably say most phones are kept out of the classroom in secondary schools, I think, but sometimes they're not. There's no consistency there. It's down to individual head teachers. We, as part of the programme, went to a school in Kent called the John Wallace Academy. Their head teacher has spent £35,000 to give each child a pouch which essentially locks the phone away, magnetically locks it away for the whole day. So they do it when they come into school, they lock it all away, it goes to the bottom of their bag, they can't access it until they leave, and unlock it when they leave. And the results have been amazing. We'll have a listen to what he says.
Okay.
When we first announced it, I think there was a feeling of disbelief. There was an initial cost of about £35,000. That was for over 1,000 students to have their own pouch.
Morning.
But since we implemented it in January, we have seen a significant reduction in the number of detentions that teachers have given out. So that's reduced by 40%.
So that's amazing, a 40% reduction.
Yeah, we're seeing less truancy in school. So students who have come to school and hadn't gone to lessons, we have pretty much eradicated that now. Reports of online bullying, reports of incidents or online abuse, it's at a 5-year low. And I think we're also seeing the rewards in things like staff retention. We were seeing rates of around 29% staff turnover. That's reduced down to 17% in the last academic year. I think staff are happier in a school where they know they're protected, where they know they're safeguarded by the leaders in the school. And there's very few things, I think, in education that you would say has been transformational, but this certainly has in our school.
I mean, Faye, that's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, those stats just speak for themselves, don't they?
They do, and as you heard from there, that was only brought in January this year, 10 months on. There's been, as was said there, transformational.
Yeah.
So extraordinary, yeah.
Well, listen, the question I have to ask then, doing all this investigation, this research, beginning with the fact that we both have our phones sat here and we are constantly looking, are you going to change your habits at all? Has it made you think?
Well, doing the 2 weeks of monitoring my own social media use was a definite eye-opener. The thing that actually annoyed me the most, if you like, was I was getting 300 notifications a day.
Wow.
And so I've seen to that, so I've kind of switched a lot of that off. And I think generally I've been more mindful to use that word about my phone use. I will ignore it quite a lot. I just think, actually, I'm not going to look at it. I've set myself time limits on certain apps, so I'm not
Really
too
good idea.
obsessed.
Yeah.
But I think even with that, I still have quite a lot of screen time because I do use it a lot for work.
I was going to say, you can't ignore those ones.
Yeah, and I think it's worth remembering that, actually some of the screen time it might be maps, I'm on my way somewhere, or I'm listening to music. So we're not saying that smartphones are all bad, it's just looking at a balance and appropriate use for children especially. And I think it's just worth saying that Ofcom rules come into force next year, all being well, as part of the Online Safety Act. Yeah. And so there will be stronger measures and more pressure on tech companies, I think, to deal with this issue with the children and make sure there's proper age verification so that they're not scrolling and not getting so addicted and being on their screens for so long.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And you know what you said? Balance.
Balance,
Bit of balance
in everything,
there.
isn't it?
Yeah, we'll do our best. So thank you so much. Fascinating. I'm going to watch the full piece that's on later. Thank you for listening. For more on this, head over to our website. And as I said, catch up on the full investigation on ITV's Tonight programme on ITVX. And of course, have a look back through our other quick briefings on a range of headline topics to find out what you need to know. Until the next time, thank you.